Hi everyone. Welcome to the let's say last speaker session of Technosemiotics of this year. Because next time we will do just like a informal seminar. But today we have Daria Arkhipova, who is finishing her PhD as a double degree in the University of Turin in Italy and the University of Tartu in Estonia. And she studies AI-mediated environments and the kind of impact that AI algorithms have on social and cultural parts of our lives. And this talk will be focused on semiosis in AI-mediated environments, exploring the dynamic sign from individual to social and cultural levels. So Daria, please. The floor is yours.
Thank you a lot, Auli. And I'm really grateful to Auli and Technosemiotics for the possibility to present part of my research in this somehow non-formal way. And obviously today we won't be talking about everything which I have on my mind, or which maybe you may have on your mind regarding AI. And my plan was to keep this presentation down to minimum, which probably still would be about 30 minutes, because as every semiotician, I really like to talk. But later I wanted to leave some time for the questions, for the discussion, because it's very interesting to see perspective of different scholars on maybe similar things which we encounter in our research. And probably if you are here, you already know what semiotics is, and you have some idea of AI. I obviously would specify it later what I intend by AI in my presentation. But in general, let's move forward and talk about our little news. So we are very happy to share with Auli that our recent article just came out in journal Semiotica, and it addresses how the methodology which can be found in the works of Yuri Lotman can be used for the analysis of AI as a part of the cultural dynamics, and how it can be analyzed not only as the final product result of AI, as we are talking here about AI-generated videos, but also as the process itself, how it's developing within semiosphere and the culture. So today in our presentation, it will have more or less a regular structure, which you may be familiar from academic years. So I would introduce a bit about how AI develops today, what are the main tools which I applied. We will talk about the particular tools from semiotics, which may be not widely applied in the area today, but which, according to my research and my findings, are strictly necessary for understanding better how we can collaborate with artificial intelligence to produce more optimal solutions and decisions. And then I will talk a bit about my findings in my PhD. Just to give you a short overview, I am doing my PhD, as I already told, in Italy and Estonia, and it's mainly focused on how artificial intelligence recommendation systems, so that's AI models which organize the information for you when you go online, and it's order how you see things online. Sorry, I wanted to see the chat and unfortunately switch to the next slide. And I did a field work after I did my theoretical research, in which I was trying to understand how can we actually say in some particular data the impact AI actually has on our decision making. And for that I did choose social media as a particular environment where I collect the data. And also, as a part of my research, I did a field work in 3 countries, in Italy, Estonia, and Netherlands, where I interview almost 100 users of social media of different age and social status, in order to understand how the data and digital ethnography data, which we can find online, or which mainly used today into accessing how users interact with artificial intelligence, is similar or different to the actual user experiences and the way they categorize it, but maybe do not express it often within the tools which are provided online. And probably just a little attention-catching part, you, as me, did see this message from Facebook, which appeared recently on my feed and probably also on yours, that today Meta goes to, so to say, paid use of their platform Facebook, which allows you for just $9.99 have your mind not impacted, have your communication not impacted by artificial intelligence sorted advertisement. But in fact, I probably would aim to explain you in this presentation that it does not really matter whether you go paid Facebook or Facebook for free. Artificial intelligence is used, and the system itself is designed the way to encourage us to interact with artificial intelligence, and it to play a major role in us adopting new decision-making strategies. So what we have today as research on artificial intelligence, and main ways to access how users interact with artificial intelligence, whether the tools of AI we use are effective, and what kind of outcomes they can produce. So one of the main approaches used by majority of the companies called big data approach, which means that we collect data about our users. It's not specific just to social media or other digital platforms. It's actually can be spread in many different areas, which just tracing the behavior and actions, I mean the traceable digital actions of people online, in order to create later patterns using machine learning and introduce them with possible solutions to their needs, problems, and obviously needs and problems of the companies. And in majority of cases, when we're talking about big data or AI-assisted decision making, it's often related to high-stakes decision, as for example, allowing some person to take a mortgage and assessing the capability of a person to deal with their banking system, or otherwise even committing the crime. I mean, this type of decisions which include AI as the sort of say agency, but later we will also talk how this agency actually relates to AI, or maybe it is sort of mediated agency which comes from the designer, users, and environment itself, the way it's structured. But the fact is that there are a lot of questions which regard ethics and moral part, and AI as a social actor, mainly in relation to these high-stake decisions. However, it is very overlooked the part where we as a users interacting on a daily basis with this kind of environments, which have AI as a main structuring device, as if we use Lotman's terminology, how it can influence our decisions and how we can learn from it. And here you can also see that there are directions which called computational neuroscience, which basically trying to analyze how it is possible to create AI which can be as close as possible to the human reasoning. And it is a part of my research to study how different is actually human reasoning in comparison to AI reasoning, which is today mainly based on the mathematics and logics, and which are in the basement of machine learning. Obviously, there are other strategies like for example, quantum computing, which is somehow very different. But unfortunately, it's not something that is used today in solving this type of problems which we are dealing on majority of digital platforms, in majority of the situations where AI actually involved. And also, there is a little talk, but maybe not enough, related to cognitive experiments which involve self-impacting apps, as for example, tools which are powered by AI, which means sorted, which aim to stimulate you in some sort of way in order to produce desired behaviors. But later we will talk about all these aspects in relation to social media and other digital platforms, which may be not strictly classified as social media, but somehow they slide under this description, as for example, we would think as a classic social media platforms where we encouraged to interact and communicate with other users, as Facebook or Instagram. But such platforms as, for example, YouTube, which also powered by AI, but even platforms which involved other activities, as for example, online dating. And here I want to speak about this experiment, which is it's one of my favorite experiments. I did talk about it already. Most probably some of you already heard about this experiment, but I will try to explain it as soon as fast as possible, that we don't take much time. So this experiment, this publication is based on the experiment which is conducted by Facebook around 2011-2012, to which around 700,000 people were involved without knowing that they were actually being actively involved in the experiment. And the fact is that they were just by signing how to say, terms and conditions of Facebook user. Unfortunately, all of us are already signed up with the possibility to participate in this kind of experiments, even without being officially introduced to the fact that we are participating. And in fact, this experiment somehow would resemble what in the previous slide I did call self-ESOL, self-educational app, which means that users of Facebook were exposed to some particular environmental patterns, which did lead them to, or which did supposed to stimulate them for some particular behaviors. So the aim of the researchers in this experiment and Facebook team in general was to stimulate users through their digital environments in order to see how they would react and whether their reaction would correspond to their expectations. And one of the findings which this article presents is that if the digital environment of a user presents majority of the negative posts written by their friends, which means the posts which were written by their friends, yes, but which were sorted by artificial intelligence in order to hide any positive information. So the users in this kind of environment start to interact with the digital platforms the way like their life is becoming more negative and themselves living more negative information. Obviously, what is confusing about these findings, not only the way how experiment was conducted and the fact that maybe some users, according to some particular rules which they follow of their behavior online, do or do not expose some sort of behaviors which can be or cannot be stimulated by this particular AI selected post. But the fact that the interpretation of the data was done also by artificial intelligence. Which means that, yes, we have statistical data which shows something, but the interpretation of this data has to be provided in quality through the qualitative methods and not just through statistics, because statistic often, especially statistic performed in this kind of experiments, do not really highlight the reasoning behind certain actions. Also, this experiment was not cognitive studies oriented, which means that when they highlighted that the users in the environments with the majority of the negative posts seen by them during 2 weeks were more responsive than the users who did see positive news for their friends, as some of the studies suggest, just because our brain works the way that it's much more valuable to know about all the cases of people who went to the forest and didn't come back than all the lucky cases when these hundreds and hundreds of people came to the forest and came back. So we need to know if there is a danger or if there is some negative threatening information out there, which means that we are more triggered by this information. So I generally had the sort of problem with this experiment, as many other researchers, because this research has significant amount of criticism, but also it is very interesting research because it is highlighting the way majority of the companies approach their data and how they use the data in order to understand whether AI that they use on their digital platforms have the impact they expect on their users. So through my studies, I was trying to use semiotic tools in order to provide descriptive methodology on what is going on within the communication on the digital environments. And here I come up with sort of scheme, which you can see is that I really like to draw exactly like Peirce and Lotman. You can recognize they are both obviously it was redrawn by me, but you can recognize their models, which propose how communication is happening around the sign and what role the sign plays within these environments. And I did propose this model, which may appear somehow complex to you, but the fact is that it aims to explain the relationships between designer, user, and the digital environment, which is largely based not only on the something that I call big data, but by this term, I would imply more like the libraries and all the data that is used within the platforms in order to train algorithm to designer needs in order to provide user with some particular output. And obviously, it was very important in this model for me to assign how these relationships are developing within the semiosphere and why the notions like encyclopedia by Umberto Eco can be important into integration of this kind of descriptive semiotic tools which can provide it. So here I propose that digital environment or social media can be seen from the environmental approach, so ecosemiotic approach, where we are dealing not exactly with data, but we are dealing rather with the text. And by text, I mean in a broader terms that Lotman use, which can apply to all the elements within the environment, which provide certain textual significance to the user, to the addressee. And also I propose that we focus on the biosemiotic part of digital environments, which may appear to someone like, how can we study AI with biosemiotic approach? Isn't it a bit scandalous? There is no bio part of AI. However, I would like to specify that AI itself, and here I probably would not agree with some presenters of the previous Technosemiotics workshops. I would say that AI by itself does not really have agency, but it can be performing a function of an agent or social agent, and agency of AI is actually coming from the designer who writes the algorithm, or designers who write the algorithm, from designer who has any or some particular ideas in mind while creating the digital environments, which means their structure and the way elements merge within it. And also designer who select in particular data sets or libraries which correspond to designer's encyclopedia, as Umberto Eco was implying. And designer creates all this in respect to the certain model of the user. Here, let's transform the notion of Umberto Eco of model reader into model user, as proposed by Marshani, though in the application to the environments, like physical environments and architecture. However, we would use it in the application to the digital environments and the architecture of the digital environment and their structure. And also here it is important aspect of the user who has a perception. And within my studies, for example, within my field work, I realized that some of my respondents do not really conceptualize the fact that they're interacting often with the user object, not another user. They interact with the icon, a representation of something which can be absolutely not another user, but just some sort of text in the more broader terms, as Yuri Lotman meant it. So here I would propose you, I would like to discuss the main differences between the decision-making process, or the process of the interaction between AI and the capabilities of AI which it has, and it can only recognize objects based on how it's created, and it can categorize it only based on what designer put in it, or otherwise what is the pattern within the data selected by designer within the environment. However, it is very different for a human communication, which starts from the perception and precognitive part of our cognition of before we start the process of recognition based on the categories which we have in our apparatus, and then proceed with the interpretation and articulation it within the languages which are available for us. Usually it is a natural language, but for some humans it can be also language of some arts. And indeed we use many different categories within our apparatus, which often even very culture specific. And then later, borrowing from Jana Walsener, our human communication is also different in the fact that we have non-categorizable and non-verbalizable part of our experience, which contribute to holistic experience as we have it. And here I would propose to use these two videos, which mainly oriented to the question of the stimulation which digital environment can provide to us. So first video I did show several times in various conferences. Here we have the filter which transform probably father's head into the horse head, we can see that girl we see on the video understood that it is not real, that it is just manipulation of the reality through the digital representation. However, she is still looks stressed on this video, starts to cry. And here I would like to present you second video. If it's too loud, please lower. So the interesting part about this video, it is obviously designer moderated AI created video, which was introduced in social media like Instagram and mainly TikTok on 13th of March 2022, so just basically 2 weeks after Ukrainian war started, and it was not official campaign on please Europe join the war and realize the responsibility we all have towards a possible violence which can arrive also to the European cities. So as a spectator, I don't know if you did see this video before, and I did see this video first when I was in Estonia on 13th of March of 2021, 2 weeks after the Russian troops entered to the Ukraine. And despite the fact that I was realizing that this video is not real, and that I can see even works of AI which are not maybe that accurate, you know, sometimes you can see that preparation of eruption, maybe something went wrong, so as AI it usually does. But the fact that it was suggested to me by my AI recommendation or the platform, which usually sort the news from my friends for me, made me feel particularly stressed about this video. And probably also you, while seeing this horrific acts of violence in European cities, may have felt, if not stressed, a bit confused. So that's why I think the impact of artificial intelligence on the digital platforms should be analyzed within different layers. And obviously here I would not go into explaining what is semiotics is, what is semiosis is, and what is biosemiotics, because I presume that all of you know all these terms. But it is important for my research to understand how these layers can be seen, if not through the digital platform itself, because we cannot always access maybe some parts of the code or intentions of the designers, but we can often see the results of the interaction with users who are humans, living creatures, and can have their agencies, which is expressed through their actions online, but also offline. And here I obviously call for Jakob von Uexküll, which suggests that it is very hard to understand what is going on in the perception of different animals. Like, for example, we cannot feel how a bat would perceive the environment, or how a frog would perceive the environment. However, we can understand or make certain descriptive presumptions based on their actions within a particular given environment, within their particular interactions and actions that they are taking within this environment, and the way they express themselves so to say, in a different way. So their postures, the way they're behaving. Strangely or interestingly, following the research of Ture von Uxküll, who was working with Adler's psychiatry school and was more focused on psychosomatic modeling of human communication and perception and interaction, he says that we obviously cannot really access what is happening within our patients, or in our case, our users' heads when they interact with artificial intelligence, but we actually definitely can ask and see how they categorize it. As for example, through the interviewing process, users can explain how they experience some of their interactions online, but also we can see how they interact with platform and other users, and how these interactions impact their physical reality based on their traces which they leave in their online spaces. So even though we are not talking about a physical space when we are talking about digital environment, we are still talking about space, which is a meaningful space. And if we would see on the behavior of some of the users online, we can see that social media is a particularly highly structured syntactically environment, encourage their users to particular behaviors, which in some respect can be impacting their users, but on the other hand, users can also impact this environment in order to transform them in the environment they would like to have. And Tom Ingold says that environments exist before dwellers come, and majority of dwellers adapt to their environment before changing it into their living spaces. The same way social media function for us on this meaningful way. So as you can see, this image represents relatively similar photos and behaviors which users took action to transform into the digital representation, also known as digital photography, and later to introduce them as a token of their daily activity to their Instagram in order to influence the environment, but also influence their own presence within this environment. And interestingly, we may think that yes, these ladies definitely were following some particular pattern in their behaviors, but also they use this particular pattern in order to integrate within environment where an algorithm as a recommendation algorithm, and its specific is to recognize similar patterns. It's exactly how it was designed in order to categorize and prioritize some elements, in this case photos or hashtags, as it used to be once upon a time, one of the major categorization tool, not only for users but also for the AI. And here I would like to introduce you three main behaviors, which for some unknown reason concerning mainly female users, but actually the fact is that according to my findings, it is not true that female users are more affected by the impact of artificial intelligence used on social media as a social agent, but female are just rather more involved into the commercial activities, which means that women usually are buying more and more subject of some cultural pressure, which convince them that they need to fit in a certain way into the environment in order to create certain social impact. It is definitely a very cultural aspect of, so to say, majority of the countries. But here I would just talk about this particular group of photos which you see on your left, which represent ladies doing more or less similar photos and posting them online, which indeed merge the practice into the digital representation, where the practice itself is not as important as a digital representation, which is created later in order to create social impact through the digital environment, in this case, Instagram. What is happening there? Artificial intelligence AI recommendations recognize better the elements which are already introduced, just because the recognition process is faster, and it makes it creates additional value behind this type of images. And then later the images which have similar elements are becoming more valuable for algorithm, more represented for other users, and subsequently more socially valuable in the particular dimension where the amount of followers and amount of interactions online is interpreted as equal to the amount of social value and interaction in the physical life. The central two images represent an Italian influencer who visited a gallery of Uffizi in Florence, and later the gallery identified that in the next several weeks, the visitors from 16 to 26 years old did grow exponentially. And here we have the digital representation, which is transforming into the physical practice, which later transform into the digital representation. So this young ladies went to make a photo with a particular painting of Venere of Botticelli, just in order to make the post online to show that they also been there, and to in this way create a social connection with the person who they follow online. And the third group is representing the female faces, which are actually not the real faces of real people, even though they may remind you some particular celebrities. These are AI altered images, which in the end are recognized by AI recommendations with more like faster and easier than the images which are original and very specific, which somehow would be more promoted to the users of social media, and would create environment where other females who would be to who these images would be recommended would be seeing more and more this type of images, considering that their face might not fit into the certain socially promoted standards which are powered by artificial intelligence. So when we're talking about what is happening within the algorithm and what is happening within users' understanding of interaction with AI agents on social media, it comes down to the fact that earlier or later users give sort of agency to AI and try to interact with it besides interacting with the elements of the digital environments, which, as you can see in this image, these ladies are intentionally post these photos online in order to convince algorithm to valorize their profiles and show it to other users in order to increase their social engagement. And here I would like to point your attention to interesting research of Michael and Baskerville, who did try to create this amazing table which semiotically describes how the physical world through the digital interactions on the level of syntactic, which mainly related to the platform, and on the level of semantic and pragmatics, about which we just talked, transform into the social world, so the beliefs, the practices. And if we would talk about affordances of AI within digital environments for their users, for their human users, because here I'm not talking about bots or other AIs which perform a particular function, a syntactic function, in order to shift semantic value or some practices. Here, semantic and pragmatics are mainly related to the user. So it is mainly up to user how to interact within the environment. However, it is very important what is environment itself, and this syntactic role of artificial intelligence and digital environment is crucial, because it allows user for self-actualization through the environment, so user can monitor themselves, they can identify themselves, and they can present themselves through these syntactic structures of the environment, if we would perceive it from the social point of view. But it also affects their precognitive and cognitive levels, as well as it allows user for self-enhancing practices, which can be with or without artificial intelligence, but mainly it is with artificial intelligence, since whatever content or whatever text users involved with on social media or share on social media is becoming a token for their self-representation, and it is usually AI-mediated. It can be also AI-mediated in the sense that user can edit their photos, or for example use autocorrect to make their text appear more English grammar correct or any other language correct, and obviously there are a significant amount of tools which help today to enhance self-representation online, and these tools often are part of the platform, so they are automatic, and user sometimes don't even question whether he or she wants this tool to be involved. And here we come to the level of scaffolding. So when user interacts with AI, even without acknowledging the part, or even on purpose, just to reach a particular result within the social impacts through digital environment, it creates sort of habits, practices, and in the end can have impact on the social and cultural level. So in my research, I did try to hypothesize and later prove through the field work the fact that interactions on AI-mediated environment are having significant effect on our biological and precognitive level, mainly through adapting and fitting to the digital environments. And even though it may not appear as restricting as a physical environment, digital environments actually take a lot of our attention. That's why they say don't text and drive, because when we look at the screens of our phones or our computers, sometimes we even become deaf, because it takes a lot of concentration and a lot of attention in order to grasp the information which we receive from digital environment. And our brain is created the same way that it often reconstructs the experience from the stimulation which we receive. So, for example, if we're focusing on what we see within our digital environment, our brain starts to reconstruct this environment in order to compensate the some particular lacks which are not provided within them, and even sometimes substitute our physical environments or merge them, which is more likely because majority of us have a holistic perception of the environments, which means that we may have like it's not easy and not always specific to identify the stimulation which may cause a particular reaction within our body on the just biological level before it reaches cognition, in order to understand how to deal with a particular stimuli or particular problem. Then later we are going to the cognitive level, which obviously related to the categorization, which on one hand obviously related to our culture and the encyclopedia. That's why majority of the IT companies today are trying to introduce the multicultural, very diverse groups of developers and designers, because on one hand, yes, designer writes a code which may be appearing once upon a time a neutral tool to solve a problem, but in fact all the machine learning tools are trained on particular libraries which are chosen indeed by the designers, and obviously it would impact the output and the result of this kind of product. Obviously at the cognitive level and also somehow precognitive level, because it all starts there, it is important to specify that on one hand these digital environments create the illusion of the feeling of control, which means that we have the environment where we have impact, we can impact how AI recommendations, for example, adapt to our needs. In sense, we can train AI to meet our needs, that we don't want to see certain type of posts, and we can indicate it to the AI. But also it brings more stress anticipation, because we have access to the more information that we would have if it would be just about our physical environment. And just by sitting on our sofa, we can be absolutely stressed and disoriented about what's happening in the world, even though physically we are located in the absolutely safe environment. It also impacts a lot our perception of others and self-categorization, self-identification, which is very important, because as a social creatures, we have a need to comply with our society, to fit into our society. And if majority of information about society we receive is coming online and it's filtered by AI recommendations, it definitely can impact us in a certain way according to the AI. And later, if we talk about the individual practices, social practices, and transformation to the level of the culture, and later comes also policies. As you know, recently Biden did announce how White House wanted to impact development of AI, which is European Union does already for a while. I think it is very interesting how we within basically the last 15 years merged within this digital environments, where nowadays AI agent is a very important aspect of it. And here, just to give you more explanation of that very complex table which I introduced in the beginning, if we would look at it semiotically, so we have the part of semiosphere, I would say, which sometimes called like digital semiosphere, about which Maria Oyema was talking at the last session. And within this, we have user, designer, and the platform, which often highly related to the elements of which this environment consists. And I didn't identify it as a data set because it's also the way of the users to impact the environment as a dynamic system. And it is not a final, how to say, it's not a still model, or it's not an object or text as a typical research object for majority of semioticians during the previous years. It's a dynamic system which develops all the time, which changes all the time, which has the elements like texts, but important to understand how this dynamic model involve all the actors and how it works as a dynamic system. And so answering to the question which I posed in the very beginning, whether you need to pay that just $9.99 a month to receive your Facebook without any ads, I think it would not really matter, because the platform itself is AI based, which represents obviously the creators, designers, and contributors. And it is a dynamic system where we are involved as an element, even though like for each of us central element of the system. However, in the end, it is a dynamic system which provides us with a particular stimuli, and which is changing. It's changing constantly, and I don't think there is any possibility for us to, let's say, escape it or have a complete control about that, because as a system all the elements are valid, they are constantly in contact with each other, they're also changing, and in the end I think it's more interesting to see how all this would be developing. So thank you a lot. And I hope I did not talk too much. Oh yes, I did talk entire hour instead of 30 minutes, which I planned.
Thank you so much.
Have a bit of discussion.
This was super interesting.
Thank you.
I'm just gonna, okay, others are welcome to join in with the video, or if you don't want to show your face, then just write in the chat and we can read it out if you have any questions. So all questions welcome. I might say, just to start, that I find your approach fascinating, and I think it comes closest to everything that I'm trying to do with like AI and semiotics, in terms of like trying to build a model of AI that includes all the people who are still there and like their agency. And at the same time, I find it also very interesting what you finished with, like the note that there is, I mean, yeah, because there is always like this tension discussion between like this technological determinism versus like social constructivism, that whether we have control and who has control over the technical systems that we build, and then other people who don't have control, and then like they, according to the constructivist view, they still should, but at the same time, I think there's like many parts in society, and some have control over some things and others have control over other things, and your model kind of also, like your approach kind of illustrates that quite well. But yeah, do you want to comment, or like have you ever thought of your research also in the terms of like this constructivist determinist parallels, or rather that's a different topic?
Thank you so much for nice words. You always know how to support my work. Yeah, I really think our research somehow meets, and I really like the way it meets, because we don't do the same things, we do very different things, but they somehow complement each other, and I think that's the most interesting part of it. And yeah, I thought about that. I actually hear a lot of discussion about it, and I did several presentations to the groups which focused on the regulations and ethics, and like I also very often hear a citation which I want to cite today, which is Umberto Eco, Apocalyptici Integrati, which is apocalyptics, and sorry, I don't know the English name for this book, but
Apocalypse
yeah,
Postponed. Yeah, or no, it's a different one. Was it up? Just go on. Is it Apocalypse Postponed, or was it a different one?
Yes, probably, yes. So I like through my field work, I realized that users, despite the fact that like I did argue with that with many other researchers who say like, come on, users don't think about their affordances when they open social media, and especially they don't think about their affordances thinking about AI recommendations, because what are affordances? And I mean, this discussion mainly was with people who are within this Western school of semiotics, like French structuralism. Like, I mean, if you have affordance, it means that you have a pen, and pen has a grip because I can hold it. So grip is affordance of a pen that I can draw, right? And I can draw it with my hand and not with my teeth or my ear or something like that, because it has particular shape and my hand has particular shape. But the fact is that in my interviews, I realized that the majority of users actually very much acknowledge the role of AI recommendation or AI agents at this point. Some of them categorize it and very willingly use it in order to not only to create a particular impact on their digital environments, but also create a particular environment on themselves. As for example, some people I interviewed told me like, I really don't need the negativity or racism on my social media. That's why I specifically curate my page and also signal to recommendations what I want to see. So whenever I go on social media, I find there a safe place. And actually, safe place, whatever includes in this concept, is not lethal. It means that they create the environment to receive a particular environment which would recreate a particular body state and cognitive state within them. Like, obviously, I heard many people who are like very horrified about what AI can do, sorry. And obviously in not only in a way like, oh my god, AI will conquer the world, but more in a specific way. For example, what if I go to bank and the AI does a mistake and they don't give me a loan and I cannot buy the house of my dreams? Or for example, what if I receive papers from my students and I cannot spot if they used artificial intelligence like ChatGPT in order to, maximize their outcomes? But obviously here the problem again comes not from AI itself. The problem comes from the environment and the way the way we structure our environment. I mean, if the teacher gives the assignment which can be performed by compilational process, because that's exactly what ChatGPT does, then maybe this assignment is not exactly a great assignment. It does not involve the development of the students, their creativity, their innovational skills. I don't know, just my brief thought.
In the chat, Francisco has written a comment or like question. Do you maybe want to speak it up loud, or I will just read it?
Yeah, I can read it.
Okay.
Thank you for this amazing talk. Thank you, Francisco. I'd like to answer if we need to think about epistemology and semiotics. Do we need to redefine recognition and observation? How we could think about the notion of discourse in your work? Thank you. Well, I think it's a very interesting question, and obviously, when we are talking about the recognition and observation in sense of redefining it, do we define it within the cognitive semiotics? Do we define it within biosemiotics? I think obviously the question of the epistemology is very important, but I think every scholar somehow is free to choose the perspective and tools of a particular area of science which fits best to their own object of research. Obviously, I understand your perspective, and my perspective on this would be that some scholars are very critical about the fact of mixing different schools, like in sense that if you choose the methodology produced in Tartu Moscow School and Lotman, it's better not to mix it with any kind of structuralist perspective or even person perspective. But I see the opening in this collaboration, because in the end many scholars were talking about very similar things. At the same time, they were just talking about the different shades of it. And I think exactly as in physics, for example, we can choose thermodynamics to study something, or nuclear physics. And if someone managed to mix all of them and in the end finding working solution, and in case of semiotics, I think our working solution, like, I mean, at least in my case, where I'm doing very practical approach to a very practical problem, which is impact which AI has on the users. I have tools which are working for my research, and I define them within my work, and I follow the definition based on the fathers of semiotics, the way they introduced them, and I explain how I apply them to my particular problem and how they can work together. But yeah, I really agree that it is really interesting, I would say, perspective and discourse in general. But I would say that if we're like, I mean, what we're struggling today, to my point of view, in semiotics, that there are several schools which doing their own things and doing it separately. And whenever we meet at the World Congress of Semiotics, someone talk about this person's semiotics and someone talks about this person's semiotics. And how come that we are studying the same object, but we're studying differently? Obviously, we have all the rights to study the same thing differently. But the question is why we are doing it. Like, I mean, obviously, there are scholars who are more interested in just theoretical perspective. And I mean, I think it's great. My perspective is more applied, more object-oriented. So this is why I need something which would be descriptive enough to be applied to a particular problem. And if I know that it is somehow was already discussed in some other authors, there is no need to reinvent it. I mean, can we talk about digital semiosphere? We can. Can we talk about the encyclopedia of designer or model user of users of social media? Yes, we can. Why can't we talk about all of them together and understand how it's all impacts the final process in the descriptive ways? I don't know if you would like to discuss more. I think it's very interesting discussion, so I would be happy to hear your opinion about that.
Sorry, Francisco, do you want to respond maybe, or not right now? Any other comments, ideas, what came to your mind during this talk?
I have some, well, I guess a lot of thoughts, but I think to help cull the thoughts and render some of them more relevant than others, I guess I start with a question, because there's this particular focus. In reading your abstract and listening to the talk, there's a particular focus on how it is social media may or may not affect people having to do, it's almost a systems theory, it's bordering on kind of a systems theoretic kind of model, and that's my impression. Please disagree, but further, I'm curious, you mentioned some, you mentioned you're interested in a particular problem, so I'm interested in some particular problems that you're interested in, that you want to focus on, so that, when you say in your kind of your abstract that you want to help aid our understanding of this communication and this impact on the user, what are some of the problems that you are particularly concerned about? And then in addition to that, how might you use biosemiotics or some other form of biosemiotics or some discipline outside of semiotics? I'm kind of more open than maybe most semioticians to that. How would some of those approaches to agency inform your approach to those particular problems? But to start with, like, what is a particular problem that you're particularly interested in?
Well, you mean in this presentation or in my research? Because my PhD research was specifically focused on decision-making process, like sort of the same AI-assisted decision-making process, where I'm actually going through what is decision-making process itself, which was not like I have an entire chapter about decision-making process, starting from how it's described in the philosophy and how it's actually described within the IT applications of today, and obviously how we can approach what is decision making through the semiotics. And obviously here, as our science is very ambient, we have a biosemiotic approach to decision making. We have a cultural semiotic to decision making. We have cognitive semiotic approach to decision making, and all of them are obviously concentrated on the fact how about the semiosis and sign and interpretation. But somehow it seems that each of them, each field was trying to stay a bit far from another one. When in the end, obviously, my research is focusing on how to show on the different levels this AI impact on the different processes of interpretation. So basically focus on the, like what my research does, it's provided the descriptive methodology to what is currently is happening in the interaction between AI and human users. starting from the lower levels, as I indicated. So sometimes AI as an agent can stimulate us on the precognitive levels. And it can also convey some categorization process on the cognitive level. Then it can be transformed to the level of individual and social practices, which can be described and understood through social semiotics. And obviously, what I think like main contribution of my research is how all this can lead to the change within our culture, which basically means that before making any policies about AI regulations, we really need to understand how it impacts us on all the previous levels. Because if we don't understand that we get like overstimulated and overstressed every time we are going on digital platforms, which AI mediated, and we are getting stressed not just because we see a particular content there, like a particular image or something, but we see like, I mean, we react to the intensity of the stimulation because AI processes object much faster than we do, and the main role of AI is encourage our interactions with digital platforms, which like, I mean, it obviously very important to understand it while we're thinking about the policies. And if the policies are mainly focused on how to regulate the companies in order to, you know, not to show something particular advertisement or not to collect some particular data without understanding these underlying levels, like, I think would be very difficult. It would just go absolutely different directions in this sense. But yeah, like, I mean, the main focus is on the description of the communication process and what we can consider, categorize as decision-making process.
Yeah. Well, let me just play a certain role here, just for the sake of conversation, if you'll indulge me, because I'm having to do this too, and I'm working with, you know, my supervisor to look at grants, you know, like, and when you're looking at grants, you know, for the European Union, for example, like one of the main things they want to know is like, what's the impact, you know, that's the, you know, for better, for worse, right? So I don't, I'm going to guess that just being able to even describe the problem really generally probably isn't going to, say you were applying for a grant, that I think that it could help your hypothetical grant application, and also me as trying to understand your project and your contribution, like so you've mentioned a couple times stress. So how it is stress might actually be increased perhaps. So was that like in your dissertation, or is there a thread through this talk that you feel like is particularly salient when it comes to making a claim about how social media, big data, the structure of how advertising works as an overlay, of forcing a constraint on how it is our digital landscape, our media landscape is formed, how that affects stress, and then if you're willing to, you know, make a claim on that, or have a stance, have a feeling about that, then how might your model help us better mitigate that stress?
I guess like, since I did not really articulate myself on the stress in this presentation, but thank you for asking. I actually was hoping that someone would specify this part. So when I was starting my research, I was thinking like, so how can I understand that there is actually impact, or maybe there is no, like, I mean, because when you're trying to say something, to grasp something, you need the result, the outcome, something for which you would hold and you say like, this is my data, I can, like, this is there, that's why it is working like that. But I figure out that obviously what we mean as a stress in our daily life, we mean some condition of disorientation or instability or something like that. When in my work, I rather presume as a stress as a reactor on stressor. So, so this is the response basically, but it is not how to say just it is savable response. So response which can be detected somehow. So if someone answers, like if you post something online and someone answers to this post, it means that they were stressed and they reacted. So their response is somehow this indicator that they were stressed by this interaction. And also stress is something which is very easy to look for, because when let's say people are stimulated, they produce a certain reaction, and stress supposedly to be a strong reaction to the stressor. So the stronger reaction, the more action they produce. And it is also somehow related to the definition of decision-making, because decision-making is not exactly provided as an action. So when I do decision, do I just remain still and just change my particular values? Like, I mean, it shifts some values from the center to periphery of my idea, like my idea or mental representation of the semiosphere, or do I go and do something particularly? So I know that it can be a bit more difficult to define within semiotics, because we do not really say have tools unless we are like neuroscientists and biologists at the same time. Otherwise we can have a blood sample, for example, and see that after 2 hours of chatting on Facebook someone gets a lot of cortisol in their blood. But it is also somehow, even in biology, not that straightforward that this cortisol is related to this particular stressor. So like what I did in my research, it was mainly focused on the categorization process. So in my hypothesis, people are getting stressed not exactly because of particular stressor, even though it contributes, but through the categorization process, which leads to their particular reaction, particular decision making. So, I mean, if the question was if I would be applying for a particular European grant to research on what I did or make my research bigger, I would definitely propose to involve a more multidisciplinary team in order to collect more data on the neuroscientific level or on the level of, let's say, biological sampling. But in my research, I did choose just methodology proposed by Ture von Uxküll, which says that through our categorization through natural language, we somehow can access what is the impact some stressors have on he used patients, but in my case it's users, right? And I think there are many ways to develop it. We can talk about the stress, but in general we can also talk about learning process, because I think we learn a lot from these interactions, and it is interesting, but many parents today like very keen to limit their time of their children with digital devices, consider it harmful. As to my experience on interviewing people, it's actually augment their learning experience, not only children but also adults, and also it makes their reaction faster, because AI stimulates you constantly. You need to constantly adjust and react. Maybe it's also causes neurosis somehow, but that I did not research. So I think it's, let's say, there are many ways to move forward, but in general, I think taking into consideration my findings, it's also possible to propose how AI tools can be improved in order to meet our needs and yeah, fit better to our lifestyles.
Thank you.
Thanks to you for the question.
I constantly forget to unmute myself, but any other comments, questions from people? I would actually also bring up another thing that I picked up in the middle of your presentation. You didn't call it as such, but we actually, when we started the Technosemiotics seminars, then the first one, it came up like this question, because we have these articles asking, does a robot have an Umwelt and so on, and does an AI have an Umwelt? And then we kind of like, some of us suggested that maybe not, but maybe AI is like a part of the Umwelt. And I kind of picked up a similar note from you also, that yeah, like AI-mediated Umwelt in a way, or like, okay, semiosphere, but would you actually also consider studying the Umwelt concept like that?
Like I did had this conversation with Alexei Sharov at the Biosemiotics gathering in Olomouc, and to be honest, I share his opinion, because according to Uxkul, to have Umwelt, you need to have perceptive organs, right? And we don't have bats echo, whatever. So we cannot perceive the world as they do, right? But obviously there are different shades of gray, so I cannot perceive the world as you do or Josh does. And I mean, it's very specific. Obviously, we can argue here whether AI can perceive the world as AI vision, as for example, historically, a significant part of artificial intelligence was actually, and machine learning in general, was actually developed for machine vision. And that's why a significant part of the algorithm which are in use today, they are for image recognition and they are for, let's say, environment recognition. But is this connected to the Umwelt? Because it is very specific to the designers who wrote this code, because I mean, to create an algorithm which performs the function of the image or environment recognition, we need a designer who has his own encyclopedia, so understanding of the world and perception of the world, which means that he was trained in some particular school with some particular professors, which told like the tools which are provided through the C++ or Python are better than some other tools. And there are also different approaches also in the algorithmic solution to let's say, to the recognition or problem. And also these designers, they choose data sets which are much better working to the training the algorithm in order to work how to recognize, I don't know, eyes. Like, for example, what is happening today on social media, that there are a lot of these filters which are working as the face recognition. And when this filter adjusts the face, face becomes symmetrical because it is programmed this way. But also if it's face augmentation filters, they make faces look more like they had plastic surgery or some Photoshop in them. Why? Because the data sets which were chosen for that were taken from the female magazines mainly, where women's faces were photoshopped before it was posted. And obviously, like AI does this process not because it perceive user certain way or want to use user to look certain way, just because it is say it's extended. Can we call it extended umwelt? I don't think so, because it's not really an umwelt. Like, I mean, in the sense that it doesn't, like, AI does not do anything which is not programmed there.
But if it's an umwelt for us, like, do you think it would change human umwelt, or it's like just because umwelt is so biologically, we still use our same senses, right?
Yeah, no, like, I mean, if you ask if AI has umwelt, to me, no. If AI could have umwelt one day, I don't think so. But if the user perceive AI agent as an agency,
okay,
definitely that would have impact on their interaction, because here we are coming also to the question of the trust between user and AI. I see Josh has something to comment. I want to hear what you want to say.
You read my micro expressions very well. Yeah, so just to comment on that, there's actually some really interesting work on the relationship between, so Nicholas Luhmann, not a semiotician, he's more of a systems theorist from back in the day, who I've come across, pretty well known, but he talks about second order observation. And I think it's pretty relevant to what it is we're all grappling with right now, insofar as we've moved through different types of cultures focused on sincerity, based on your place in your family. So your identity was really grounded in your place in the family order. Then it became about authenticity, like in the 90s, let's say. But now it's more about cultivating your profile. So another professor, Professor Moeller, I can send you the links if you're interested, a more contemporary philosopher who builds his body of work off Nicholas Luhmann's body of work, talks about this idea that there's this quote unquote generalized peer. In other words, this individual or this like entity, this avatar that doesn't actually exist. It's just the data upon data, these algorithms upon algorithms in interaction with us as beings and agents with umwelts doing semiosis. And I agree with you that this generalized peer, this thing in the data structure that literally exists in the data structure itself, does not have an umwelt, does not do semiosis. Nevertheless, there's this feedback loop between our collective interaction with what becomes our environment, the social media, and a lot of, especially say young girls, for example, will absolutely modify their decisions based on influencers that they're particularly focused on. But the interesting thing is that the influencers themselves are all, this is the second order aspect of it. It's not just first order between a population and some like influencer. There's actually living in the data, so to speak, living, bad choice of words, but existing in the data, so to speak, is this second order aspect. And what I mean by that in particular, what I think Nicholas Luhmann meant was that even the influencer is highly aware of how he or she is being observed, and that they are being observed, and that this is actually kind of new in our AI infused panopticon, if you know that term. Panopticon, like we're all sort of willfully clicking on accepting the EULAs of Facebook and all, the user agreements, letting all of our data go to the cloud, and then it comes back to us and it actually begins to modify us in our behavior in this second order aspect. Whereby we're all aspiring to, both the influencer and the influence, we're aspiring to some perfection, some sort of average that isn't actually a sentient being. And that's not some sort of conspiracy. I'm not at all implying that this generalized peer is going to become sentient at some point. No, I don't. But nevertheless, to your guys' conversation, I think it is a huge factor in our Umwelt. It's something that factors very, very hugely into our Umwelt and how it is we make decisions.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. And it's one of the aspects which I wanted to, which I usually talk about. It was not, how to say, since I was not focusing particularly on the user, but on the environment, I was not talking about that. But the fact that, basically, a lot of influencers, as you say, they are trying to transform their digital representation into the social volume, because otherwise, if they cannot sell, they won't be paid. It's their job to do it. But in order to do so, they say it's not exactly the impact on them. I'd say, me, Stephanie, I impact you, Bellatrix, or something like that. It's there is this medium agent, as you say, which is AI, which AI sorts whether Stephanie or 100 other influencers would be first there, to be seen on the feed of the Bellatrix. And first, Stephanie, before posting, she needs to consider AI, because up to him, up to the AI, her success and influence depends, and not the contact which she is able to create with her potential peers. I also had a very interesting question from Dario Martinelli at the last Congress of Semiotics, and he asked me if social media influencers are narcissists. And it is actually very interesting questions. At first I thought, well, I think they are actually somehow vice versa, because narcissist is someone who is really in love with whatever he is, and I'm great, guys. Just accept me as I am, right? But problem of the influencers of today that they do not, it's not up to them to decide who and how and when they would be accepted. It's up to the algorithm. So they need to do things which would be recognized by the algorithm, which means that they, whether within the structure of the platform, whether through the data sets which are already there on the platforms. And somehow it's actually very interesting that later it transformed into the social practices. So, we can resist as much as we can, but if we see that all the people around the world wearing a watch, and watch is let's presume that watch is not a common object, but everyone has a watch, and everyone follows the time, and time is an important social construct to be updated to. Earlier or later, it will go, and the algorithm on our perception and cognition works exactly this way. So it's repeatedly represent as some digital representations of objects, of the texts. And let's say earlier or later, we start to accept them as a central part of our semiosphere. So I think it's a very interesting discourse what you started, and I think many is somehow aware of that, but maybe not conceptualize it that much.
Yeah.
I cannot say how much it works at the level of marketing.
Yeah,
Probably
because there's also the phenomena of Well, I think if influencers are narcissists, like so are academics, like or performing artists, any artist who has an audience could be accused in a similar way to an influencer.
Actually, I mean, narcissist is more psychological thing, right?
Yeah,
We can
that's a very
call it like
particular
high
thing.
self-esteem,
We shouldn't
right?
be throwing around that term like loosely.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was just how question was asked, but I obviously see, like, as a concerned parent, I would be probably asking in more or less the same way.
Yeah.
But we were talking about the role of algorithm on Google Scholar and academia, and it is actually, how to say, almost shocking that some researchers are more, how to say, more on the top of the list. So when, for example, you would look for some citation or for some article on Google Scholar, the tool which is specifically created to, help academic career, you would see some researchers more on the top, and some maybe you would have to go through 3 or 4 pages before you find them. And sometimes, I'd say they are sorted not based on the real citation, which means that Google would be sorting them based on the visualization, citation, or other metrics. But how this citation are created, sometimes it's not a real citation, it's just, let's say, statistical mistake when algorithm recognize maybe some similar words within the text of others, and it assigns citation where it is actually not there. And there is a significant impact on academic careers today. Like, obviously, one can have very different academic career, but if academic career would consist to giving presentation and going to the being invited for different lectures at the different universities, and how to say, being very visible, then algorithm of Google Scholar and academia would have impact on that.
Yeah, it's also, I was just listening to a podcast today, really clarifying in a way how it is. In fact, they were talking about influencers as it happened from a feminist, the latest fifth, whatever wave of feminism we're on, for like fifth wave or whatever. It was really fascinating because it was talking about female influencers and how it is that they were actually becoming imprisoned by their own sort of brand, so to speak, because the users would get really disappointed and really angry if so a lot of times these lifestyle influencers, for example, the whole point of their deal is that they create a routine that's kind of self-soothing for their followers, and that give the impression that if only we all had that routine, we would all be, productive by this somehow second order observation that some observer out there observing us would say, oh, that person's productive by some kind of social standard. But the problem is that at the end of the day, we're all just content creators for some other structural dynamic. And that's actually one of the first thoughts I had while I was listening to your talk, is that what I wanted to overlay on your model, and of course this is my projection of sort of some of my own questions, even in my own work, which I haven't resolved for myself, but is that the algorithm is in the service of servicing another structure. It's not in the service of servicing the content creators. It's not in the service of servicing the users or the audience. It's in the service of creating capital for capitalists. And this brings in a whole nother very, perhaps for some people, tired discourse, but nevertheless, it's an interesting question to ask oneself, like when we're talking about some, the possible pernicious outcomes to, say, our youth and social media. I think it's an interesting overlay, and it's a question to you, like, what are your thoughts on that, the overlay of that the technology is just, it's not that different. It's just essentially the same habit, the same structure that's been here for at least a couple hundred years of generating value for people that we never see and we never hear about, and they're sitting on some Caribbean island just collecting a check. And so you know, how does that maybe figure into your model?
Yeah. Well, I as you see, I didn't say the word economy or commercial in my presentation at all, because naively, probably I consider it's very obvious through, let's say, through all the research. I mean, like it is definitely commercial. It is definitely economic oriented. There is definitely a person who is not even designer, who is like paying money to designers to develop a code and all the other things. But I probably also have a lot of fun thinking about this process in my brain, because to me it looks like very, how to say, like that meme when client describes something to, how to say, manager describes it to designers describe it to the junior designer. In the end, we get something completely opposite to what client wanted. And I think with the approach to AI, it actually works amazingly funny in this extent, because many it doesn't matter how amazing designer is or group of designers, they do not write all the code by themselves. And even if they do, they use the models which are already developed by the groups of other designers, which means that the algorithm can perform some things in some particular environments and conditions, which would be unexpected to them. And it brings this type of, how to say, also, if we would involve user who, you know, sometimes use pen as to write, sometimes use it to clean the sink, and I mean, users may find different ways how to apply the platform. I interviewed a person who was using algorithm of, algorithm of Spotify to find the same version, like different versions of the same song, because it did calm her down to hear the repetitive music. So she knows the song, she knows what the song is about, but she likes to listen it in jazz, in different versions. And she told that she uses it to, you know, to soothe yourself, not to think about world problems. Like, obviously there is a commercial part, and I definitely agree that our world is a bit too much, let's say, productivity oriented, whatever these KPIs mean. But if we leave apart this particular income part, like all this social media and many digital platforms, like even Amazon, have a lot of simulacrum in it, which, as you told about the productivity and lifestyle, and I'm like, as a PhD student, as you all know, we really need to be productive, right? But productivity itself is a simulacrum, but social media and algorithm in general is very successful into putting the concepts under this simulacrum, which would make it more real, more understandable, and more applicable to our life, and also would make us want it more. And actually, majority of like even self-help literature, which I did see today, which was recommended to me by artificial intelligence on social media, is really much focused on the part of you know, to creating value behind a certain concept, which I don't think it's like, maybe somehow it's influenced by the designers, social media managers, and those who would like to receive profit from that. But somehow it's not 100% controllable process. I mean, we are not like mice in the box. Obviously, having critical thinking, I think really helps when you, let's say, realize that you've been tricked. But many people, according to my field work, actually feel happy to be tricked. They feel calm. Like, I mean, many women who see something online and then they buy it, they feel happy about that. It's they should say, now I also have these shoes. I'm like Kylie Jenner. Like, I feel rich, I feel amazing, I feel good. And it doesn't matter that my boss is not very nice person, and like it's half of my salary to have these shoes. I mean, obviously problem is much bigger, probably. I don't know. But like I think, as you were saying about users umwelt, is very very important, how we actualize this impact and how we interact with it. It's an interesting discussion.
Yeah, work in progress.
Yeah. That's a challenge for the next decades, probably, if the Earth holds up this whole ecosystemic thing that's called AI development, then we can still study the impact on culture and society for decades to come, probably.
Thank you a lot, Auli, again for inviting me. I think we can stop here.
Yeah, it seems that we can wrap up as time is almost up. So
how to go to Bahamas and spread the money to everyone who actually deserves them.
Yeah.
Okay, but yeah, then I'll stop the recording and say first thank you to everybody who listened, and you can later watch it on YouTube.